Well, it's great to be here in this part of the world. I'm always happy to come back. Actually, my grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-grandmother, and my grandmother, my aunt, and the whole family used to come to Florida. They were full-blood Creek Indians, and then they would come out to Stewart. And yeah. And they had a place out there, and they worked with the Seminole people there. Because the Muscogean, Seminoles are Muscogean, and there's a long story and connection and so on. And so I'm close to my grandfather, Henry Marcy Harjo. And even though I never met him, and he had passed before I was born, but I'm close to him. It's just that way. Anyway, I was looking up what tribes were in this area, or still are, and I know there were Seminole camps around here, and it was a group called the Jaga, who are Chitimacha, of the Chitimacha language. And the Chitimacha, many of them are still over in Louisiana, and some of them got folded into the Muscogee Creek Nation. The Muscogee Creek Nation was a confederacy of different small tribes who banded together for political reasons to deal with France, Spain, Great Britain, and the most challenging was the U.S. government. And anyway, I wanted to play a song in honor of the original people and the keepers of this land, and to acknowledge them. You know, they didn't go away. People are still here. I want to say thank you, Armado, as we say in the Muscogee Creek language, for water. And that rain, that little rain, when I went over and changed and came back through the rain, and I was thinking about Australia, and I was thinking about the world and how water is our life force, and we need to take care of it. This is called Calling the Spirit Back. For calling the Spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet. Often there's stories about how these poems came about, and this one, I must have needed it. And we are all on a journey to reclaim ourselves, to become ourselves. And sometimes we get lost. Everybody does at some point. Or we get caught in that morass of hopelessness. And sometimes it's a single human being who does, and sometimes it's a whole nation who is a being who does. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way, though there may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. Ale-na, ale-no. Ale-na, ale-no. Ale-na, ale-no. Ale-na, ale-no. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party or a gala. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark. This one is called Rabbit is Up to Tricks. And Rabbit is our trickster figure in the Muscogee, for the Muscogee people, as it is for a lot of West African people too. And trickster figures are those that they show us our worst human behavior. They act it out for us so that we can see how not to be. And they kind of belong in the realm of clowns, of jesters, who are always close to the seat of power. And they're parked there. They belong there because they're important, because people who hold and wield great power can sometimes get entranced by that power or forget that the power does not belong to them. It belongs to everyone. And then in some times, in some ages, what happens is that things get so turned around that tricksters wind up sitting in the seat of power. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was Rabbit, fooling around with clay in the wind. Everybody was tired of his tricks and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person. And when he blew into the mouth of that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clay man how to steal a chicken. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife, and that clay man obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful, and clay man felt important and powerful. And once that clay man started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn. And once he took that wife, well, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold. He wanted all the gold. Soon it was land or anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries. Then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning for life. We began to forget our songs, our stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk with each other across the kitchen table. Forests were being mowed down all over the world to make more. And Rabbit had no place left to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call that clay man back. But when that clay man wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he made a clay man with no ears. This is called This Morning I Pray for My Enemies. I wrote this. I was upset about something and I was trying to find a way to resolve it. This morning I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing, even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. I brought a poem by Thomas Lux to read. I didn't know him. I met him at a poetry festival much like this, and it was in the Pacific Northwest. I remember that because we went into a longhouse which is a gathering place for music, for poetry, for ritual, for ceremony, for gathering together in tribal nations up in the Northwest. And his poetry looks like him. Have you ever noticed that with cartoonists and you see them and they look like their art? Yeah? Well, he kind of, his poetry is just so full and thick with, it's like drawn with heavy and yet precise images and lines. And it's interesting how this is very prophetic, but maybe all history's always been like this. And so it's called "And Still It Comes" by Thomas Lux. Like a downhill brakes burned freight train, full of pig iron ingots, full of lead, life-size statues of Richard Nixon, like an avalanche of smoke and black fog, lashed by bent pins, the broken off tips of switchblade knives, the dust of dried offal. Remorseless, it comes, faster when you turn your back, faster when you turn to face it. Like a fine rain, then colder showers, then downpour to razor sleet, then egg-size hail, fist size, then jagged, laser, shrapnel hail, thudding and tearing like footsteps of drunk gods or fathers. It comes, polite, loudish, assured, suave, breathing through its mouth, which is a hole eaten by a cave. It comes like an elephant annoyed, like a black mamba terrified. It slides down the valley, grease on grease, like fire-eating birds' nests, like fire melting the fuzz off a baby's skull. Still it comes, mute and gorging, never to cease, insatiable, gorging and mute. So this is an Ars Poetica. And I think of, after reading this, I changed the order a bit because I thought that sounds like an Ars Poetica, actually. It does to me anyway. Break my heart. There are always flowers, love cries or blood. Someone is always leaving by exile, death, or heartbreak. The heart is a fist. It pockets prayer or holds rage. It's a timekeeper, music maker, or backstreet truth teller. Baby, baby, baby. You can't say what's been said before, though even words are creatures of habit. You cannot force poetry with a ruler or jail it at a desk. Mystery is blind, but wills you to untie the cloth in eternity. Police with their guns cannot enter here to move us off our lands. History will always find you and wrap you in its 1,000 arms. Someone will lift from the earth without wings. Another will fall from the sky through the knots of a tree. Chaos is primordial. All words have roots here. You will never sleep again, though you will never stop dreaming. The end can only follow the beginning, and it will zigzag through time, governments, and lovers. Be who you are, even if it kills you. It will, over and over again. Even as you live. Break my heart, why don't you? So this book, American Sunrise, totally surprised me. I was about to teach my last semester at the University of Tennessee, University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And I was doing a double load in a semester so I could go back home and leave and not have to teach the second semester. So I had a double load. I was working with a team on the Native anthology, a Native Norton anthology. I was bringing in another book, a play from Wesleyan was publishing. I had all the poetry students because I was the last poet standing in the program. Not because it was not a good, it was an excellent program, but you know, one of our poets retired, one died, and I was standing there that summer thinking, and I was working on a musical. I'm still working on the musical, and I stood out and looked out at the trees, and thinking about how ironic, terribly and painfully ironic, that I was going to leave a place that our people fought so hard to stay. And here I had come, and they had welcomed us back to the southeast, and then I was going to leave. And it's like, where do I put that? Where do I put that history, and how can I leave and yet go back? And my spirits asked me the question, then what did you learn here? And so I started writing an American Sunrise when I had no time, when writing a new poetry book was the last thing on my list. So this was the poem that started it, because I was looking out and looking at the trees, but I know the history there. And one time we were driving, we were driving around, as we did. My husband's the same tribe, and the same ceremonial ground. We have different ceremonial grounds, different clans, and we're both Ogiabova or Hickory ground. So we were all over the place, and we even found a home that had belonged to one of my relatives. And I remember going to one place, and there were people crying. You could just hear it. And then we looked, and it had been a place they had gathered for one of the Trails of Tears, because the soldiers would gather people up. And so I remember looking out thinking, where do you start? Where in the world do you start? I know you think about that writing a poem or anything, so you say, where does it start? Where are you going to start with this kind of history that's so overwhelming that you run from it, that you can't digest? There's no way to digest it. How to write a poem in a time of war. There's also an image in here of twin baby girls that came from the news, young little Assyrian babies caught up in conflict and war that they didn't want anything to do with. How to write a poem in a time of war. You can't begin just anywhere. It's a wreck. Shrapnel in the eye of a house, a row of houses. There's a rat scrambling from light with fleshy trash in its mouth. A baby strapped to its mother's back, cut loose. Soldiers crawl the city, the river, the town, the village, the bedroom, our kitchen. They eat everything or burn it. They kill what they cannot take. They rape what they cannot kill. They take. Rumors fall like rain, like bombs, like mother and father tears swallowed for restless peace. Like sunset slanting toward a moonless midnight. Like a train blown free of its destination, like a seed fallen where there is no chance of trees or any place for birds to live. No, start here. Deer peer from the edge of the woods. We used to see woodpeckers the size of the sun and were greeted by chickadees with their good morning songs. We'd started to cook outside, slippery with dew and laughter. Ah, these smoky, sweet sunrises. We tried to pretend war wasn't going to happen, though they began building their houses all around us and demanding more. They started teaching our children their God's story, a story in which we'd always be slaves. No, not here. You can't begin here. This is memory shredded because it is impossible to hold with words, even poetry. These memories were left with the trees. The torn pocket of your daughter's hand-sewn dress, the sash, the lace, the baby's delicately beaded moccasin still connected to the foot, a young man's note of promise to his beloved. No, this is not the best place to begin. Everyone was asleep, despite the distant bombs. Terror had become the familiar stranger. Our beloved twin girls curled up in their nightgowns next to their father and me. If we begin here, none of us will make it to the end of the poem. Someone has to make it out alive, sang a grandfather to his grandson, his granddaughter, as he blew his most powerful song into the hearts of the children. There it would be hidden from the soldiers, who would take them miles, rivers, mountains, from the naval cord place of the origin story. He knew one day, far day, the grandchildren would return, generations later, over slick highways constructed over old trails, through walls of laws meant to hamper or destroy, over stones bearing libraries of the winds. He sang us back to our home place from which we were stolen in these smoky green hills. Yes, begin here. So I don't always know where I'm going in a poem, and otherwise it won't be a poem. It's about learning something I didn't know before. And so when it came to the part with the song, I thought, whoa, that's what happened. That's how we found our way back. And that poem it was a song, or what I'm calling song poem, because all poems have their roots in music. And of course, dance is always right there also. But I was thinking a lot about those times in the mid-1800s, and then the correlation between those times and now. One of the survivors of the Muscogee Creek, there's a lot of trails of tears. The Chitimacha speaking people here were on a trail of tears. That's how they wound up in Louisiana. And we've got another one going on with indigenous peoples coming up from the south. There was, for years and years, there was no border at U.S. and Mexico. It was long before, there was a time, it wasn't that long ago where there was no USA or there was no Mexico. But it's the same thing going on there. Anyway, the survivor in his, I quote him at the beginning of the book, says, when we all made it into Indian Territory on the Trail of Tears, there were no babies left. And they killed them all. So I wrote this thing called A Refuge in the Smallest of Places. And I dedicate it to Emily Dickinson, one of the singers, because she helped me make it through her voice. I found a kindred voice in her as a child. And it was the voice of somebody who, you're singing and you might be singing in the dark and you might be the only one who can hear. But at the same time, you've been sung to, because how would you know how to sing? And for all those fleeing on those ancient migration trails north for home, a refuge in the smallest of places. Someone sang for me and no one else could hear it. When I had given up and made knife marks on my arm, or drank and gave myself away or was given. Someone sang for me and no one else could hear it. When demons came with ropes and cages to take my children from me and imprison us. Someone sang for me and no one else could hear it. Now I am here in this timeless room of lost poetry, gathering up the destroyed and forgotten. Because of the songs someone sang that no one else could hear but me. One of my favorite stories, it's like things don't disappear, especially poetry or songs. They're made with such intent of language, such concentrated language, as songs are, that, they don't go away. One of my favorite stories is I'm on the board of the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, and our chairman, Sven Hawkinson, was a major force for a cultural renaissance for his Aleut people up in Alaska, from Kodiak Island area. And they had it pretty rough. I know that the Russians used to play games and line them up and shoot a cannonball through to see how many they could kill. And there were, all kinds of things went on to, and they were hanging on culturally. And so, as a young man, and he studied anthropology, he went back into museums to see where their things were, all of their cultural pieces. And with the people, he started reassembling, and they started bringing back the language and their culture. There they were with their culture. Again, there they are. And one of the Tlingit people over called to them and said, "We saved some of your songs years ago. We saved them because we knew you would want them, that someday you would come to us." And they had quite a ceremony when they went over, and the Tlingit people returned songs to them. So they're all there. That's why all of this relying on the computer memory is dangerous. We can grow our memories. There's so much out there. It's most literature in the world is not written down, and there's so much that belongs to us that we can't hear. Okay, this next piece is called "Once the World Was Perfect." And it's a song I'm working on. I have it on, I would just play it for the song, but I'll play it for you live. I'm not good at lip syncing. Anyway, it's based on the origin story, Muscogee Creek origin story. Okay, so I'm ready for Falling, Falling, whoever is doing the music. Once the world was perfect, and we were happy in that world. Then we took it for granted. Discontent began a small rumble in the earthly mind. Then doubt pushed through with its spiked head. And once doubt ruptured the web, all manner of demon thoughts jumped through. We destroyed the world we had been given for inspiration for life. Each stone of jealousy, each stone of fear, greed, envy, and hatred put out the light. No one was without a stone in his or her hand. There we were, right back where we had started. We were bumping into each other in the dark. And now we had no place to live because we didn't know how to live with each other. Then one of the stumbling ones took pity on another and shared a blanket. A spark of kindness made a light. The light made an opening in the darkness. Everyone worked together to make a ladder. A wind-clan person climbed out first into the next world. And then the other clans, the children of those clans, the children of those clans, all the way through time, through this moment, to you. I always like to say thank you to Adolphe Sax, who invented the saxophone. He was from Brussels, Belgium, and invented the saxophone in Paris out of heartbreak. He wound up penniless, actually, and had a lot of hassle because people thought he had invented a demon instrument. But I love the saxophone, and it doesn't make sense to be a poet and play a saxophone because you can't play behind your words, except on recordings. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to read this one. It's called Indian School Night Song Blues. I'm going to read it too. I was especially thinking of the young poet who was talking about doing spoken word, and I remember coming up as a poet and being told that if you perform it was pejorative. It was not considered high-minded poetry if you performed it. That you were not supposed to read with any kind of emotion. That the poem was supposed to reveal itself, and then that turned into deconstructionism and a poem having no place but separated from any human being, blood, dreams, and so on. Well, I'm a romantic, and maybe too much so. But anyway, this one it's more like a monologue, and it takes place. I went to Indian boarding school, and not the usual Indian boarding schools, although its root was there. We could hear some of the ghosts of little children crying for when they used to take children away from their parents, like they're doing now at the border, and send them away to school. But this school was an experiment in education, in Indian education, with they discovered, that word discovery is tricky, they discovered that Native students were very good at art and very good at, so they got the idea of making a school around the arts, and it became the Institute of American Indian Arts, which when I went to school there in the late 60s, it started in 64, I was there in 67, 68, and it was a school, mostly high school, from like 7th grade to 12th grade plus 2 years postgraduate. And it saved my life. It was the first place I went to school in a community where I felt at home. We were all natives from tribes all over the country, and we were artists. We were making art. I didn't study poetry there. There were literature classes, and my mentor was a very famous composer, Louis, he's Quapaw, I know his name, Louis Ballard, really famous, and he was my high school mentor. He had been assigned to me, and I'd go hang out in his studio. And later on, when he was real happy when I started doing music, and I stayed friends with him until the end. But so in the school, you had details. So you had these incredible artists, who were some of the best artists in Indian country, and then you had Bureau of Indian Affairs employees for academics, and then military lingo all through. So it was interesting. We had incredible arts classes, and then what I have found in Bureau of Indian Affairs schools, or schools in Native schools that are way out in the communities, that you get people. It seems like you get people who are very dedicated and love teaching and love the students, and then you got people who were on the run. And we had some of those there. One of them taught about, we were supposed to learn world history, and all we learned all semester was about nudity in Egypt. Which was, entertaining. But on Friday and Saturday nights in the main dorm, I was a high school student, the staff would come around. They would send somebody around with a clipboard, and they would smell your breath. You'd have to open your mouth and breathe, and to make sure you weren't drinking. And so this little piece, this poem monologue, is from a girl who has been on restriction at Indian school, which meant that on Friday and Saturday night you have to stay in the dorm, sequestered in this one big room, and you couldn't go out and hang out with everybody, go to the dance at the canteen, or hang out. And but people, if you were on restriction, and it was usually for speaking your native language, or for other infractions, or for drinking, they would. People would feel sorry for you and sneak things into you that you weren't supposed to have. So this is one of the speaker is Redbird Manawi, who's had a little bit of too much of what people have snuck into her. But she's seeing very clearly she loves her friends. A call to order the meeting of girls on restriction at Indian school. Locked up in the dorm, we broke the rules. Now it's Saturday night, no booze, you lose. Music courtesy of KOMA straight from Oklahoma City. Across the plain of tears and fears and over the mountains to hear the city different. Indian school, hippie crash, let's dance, where's the dorm matron, hide the stash. We all admire Marlene. She's one of the best. She's Jackson Pollock in a dress. She only leaves the painting studio for sleep or work, and on Sunday she sneaks out to the Indian hospital on the other side of campus. She took me once. The children clapped and laughed when we came in. She brought them gifts, all her desserts saved up for a week, crayons, paper, and tiny fans. We hid when the staff came in. They eventually threw her out. The hospital carried no insurance to cover the harm she might do. And Venus, now that's a name and a history. One parent from the north on the back of a horse, the other from the south over the back of a river. Venus is a singer, a real singer. Each singer has a particular gift. Some grow plants, some call helpers, some heal the sick, some make the dead rise up and dance. When Venus sings, we enter into a trance. We no longer hurt from freak chants. You're going to make it to Broadway, either New York or Albuquerque. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, you're as silent as a mouse in the corner of the dining hall, chewing on stale American bread. We don't know who you are or where you've been. Maybe you're dead to this reality. None of us are coping well with the BIA. We've read the reports. It doesn't speak well with others. Won't speak or look us in the eyes. Talks to ghosts. But we hear what they're really saying. We have the guns, and we have your children. Mary's spirit is mostly underground with clay. When she's with us, she roams the halls in precise eyeglasses, bell-bottoms lace tight, and a stack of poetry in her arms. T.S. Eliot, she says, needed to put his hands in clay. She reads him every day, perched with her books outside the powwow circle. Where's Kip? We can't find her anywhere. She's not in the laundry room practicing powwow in her underwear. She's not on the roof where she sneaks her smokes. She's not in the tent she made of government-issued bedspreads where she sketches high fashion of Indians in Paris. Here comes Kip with a knife. And there she goes. No top or bottom, only fury whirling in a spiritual nudity. She's headed out into the snow. She's what happens when somebody hurts the baby. We can corner our sheets so a quarter spins and know the drill for shots, debugging, and towels. We have a chance. Okay. So I miss the birds. I'm living in I have a Tulsa Artist Fellowship, which is great, and you might think of applying next time. They're artists and they're writers too. and it's a great. The fellowship is for a year. You get a studio. They give you an apartment, and they give you a stipend. And then you're with a great group of artists. There's all kinds of like performing artists, painters, sculptors, all kinds of. It's a great community. And I don't know why I was introducing the poem with this. All I know what it is I miss the birds. I'm living downtown in the artist district right now, and every place I've lived, I've always had lots of birds, and there are birds there. It's just harder. There's more distance because there's a big train that goes behind the apartment building. And but when I was in Tennessee, this is one of the Tennessee birds. The story is from, and they. And I watch them. They have political stuff going on too. And I've watched birds get in a circle. I remember these group of minor birds when I was living in Hawaii. They got in a circle. They ganged up on a guy. They looked like they were punching him. They had him in a circle, and you could yell at them, and they wouldn't stop. I've just seen all kinds of, And then one time, I had moved back and had bought my sister's house after my mother passed, and I should be telling this with the next poem. And but my sister had lived in that place for over 30 years. She got our mother's house when she passed, and there was always this robin family, and they were always there. So I knew there were grandchildren. There was all these generations of robins, and so I remember going outside right after I had moved in, and the robin was asking me, you listen with the same ears you listen for poetry with, and then you can hear them. And that doesn't quite go with this poem. But, and the robin was asking me, well, who are you? Because my sister had been all those years of family members. I said, well, I'm her sister. And then I would go out and play flute every morning to welcome the day and the sun. And those birds, they really liked me. That robin liked me because he said, we hadn't seen anybody like you. You're like a human bird. They had never seen anybody play a sax. I didn't play my sax out there. The neighbors would have had a fit. But I played flute. So I was watching this bird couple. I was watching this couple. And she asked her husband, her male companion, the same question that a lot of women ask their husbands or partners. And you always kind of get, the answer that I usually get is nothing. Well, I wonder what you are thinking. So this is from a bird point of view. I wonder what you are thinking, the feathered wife asks her feathered husband. She watches as he cleans his wings, notes how he sends his eyes over the horizon to Viridian in the flying away direction. So many migrations stacked within sky memory. Her body is stirring with eggs. She tucks found materials into their nest with her beak. The nerves in her wingtips sense rains coming to soften the ground, to send food to the surface of earth. He says nothing. And he wonders about the careless debris that humans make, even as it yields ribbon, floss, and string. House cats and their sporting trails are on his mind's map. There are too many in this neighborhood. A ragged yellow fellow eats birds after hours of play. He stays out of that Tom's way and has warned his wife the same, though she's more wisely wary than him. Dogs are easy. They bark and leap and wag their tails. They have no concerns for most flying things. They lap up human trails for love. And why do we keep renewing this ceremony of nests? Each feathered generation flies away. What does it mean and why? The green growing green, turning red against yellow, then gray, gray, and green again. When I need her heartbeat in the freeze winds, why is she always there and not somewhere else? Her little question has made an echo in his ears, like a string fluttering from a bush in a delicate spring wind. I wonder what you are thinking. He doesn't answer. Then he does. Nothing. I was thinking about the nothing of nothing at all. So every poem has poetry ancestors. And this one is Lucille Clifton, Homage to My Hips, is a poetry ancestor of this poem. And I wrote this one in Tennessee in the back, thinking about Trail of Tears. And this is called My Man's Feet. And everybody, when he's with me at a reading, everybody always comes back and wants to look at his feet, which he's very thrilled about. So I want to say thank you to Lucille. I miss Lucille. And then I go to find her and to hear her in her poetry. That's a problem when you get older and you miss people. My man's feet. They are heroic roots. You cannot mistake them for any other 6-foot walker. I could find them in a sea of feet, a planet or universe of feet. They kicked the sky at birth in that town his great-grandfather found. My man's feet left childhood, past the mineral grit of an oil flesh bust to these atomic eastbound lands. His feet are made of his mother's spiritual concern and of his father historic and mindfully upright. What walkers, from mound builder steps that led to the sky maker, past Spanish galleon, stagecoach, and railroad snaker. One generation following another, no other feet but these could bear the rock stubborn loyal bear, towering intelligence and children picker-upper. That is the one who owns these feet. What an anchor his feet provide for his unmatched immense ability and get-up-again-ality. I've danced behind this man in the stomp dance circle, our feet beating rhythm together, man, woman, boy, girl, sun and moon jumper. My man's feet are the sure steps of a father looking after his sons, his daughters. For when he laughs, he opens all the doors of our hearts, even as he forgets to shut them when he leaves. And when he grieves for those he loves, he carves out valleys enough to hold everyone's tears with his feet, these feet, my man's widely humble, ever steady, beautiful brown feet. I'm going to read 2 or 3 more. I'm going to read this one before I read this little longer one. I remember asking Tracy K. Smith if she wrote anything during her tenure as a poet laureate. And she said she wrote 1 poem and then worked on a libretto. So here's my 1 poem so far. Yeah. It's called The Life of Beauty, and there's all the words in here I was told not to use in the writer's workshop. I didn't do this deliberately. That's just how it is. Like the word beauty or the word life. The life of beauty. The sung blessing of creation led her into the human story. That was the first beauty. Next beauty was the sound of her mother's voice, rippling the waters beneath the drumming skin of her birthing cocoon. Next beauty, the father with kindness in his hands as he held the newborn against his breathing. Next beauty, the moon through the dark window. It was a rocking horse, a wish. There were many beauties in this age, for everything was immensely itself, green, greener than the impossibility of green, the taste of wind after it slide through dew grass at dawn, or language running through a tangle of wordlessness in her mouth. She ate well of the next beauty. Next, beauty planted itself urgently beneath the warrior's shrines. Next, beauty beaded by her mother and pinned neatly to hold back her hair. Then how tendrils of fire longing grew into her, beautiful the flower between her legs as she became herself. Do not forget this beauty, she was told. The story took her far away from beauty in the tests of her living. Beauty was often long from the reach of her mind and spirit. When she forgot beauty, all was brutal. But beauty always came to lift her to stand again. When it was beautiful all around and within, she knew herself to be corn plant, moon, and sunrise. Death is beautiful, she sang, as she left this story behind her. Even her bones, said time, were tuned to beauty. Now, this poem surprised me. Because I was in the middle of, I do a lot of research. I think most poets do. We're always researching and reading. And I was working on trying to force myself to read a lot of Southeast history, or a lot of people's history. It's hard. I read a little bit, I put it down, I get depressed for weeks, and then pick it up again, and so on. And in the middle of all of that, this poem it had been sitting there, I guess, waiting to form itself and to elbow its way in and plant itself there. And I guess it came up of when my mother passed in October 2011, and I helped midwife her. I later realized I helped midwife her into the other world because, I have been present at birth many times with grandchildren and children, and death is always just as present, standing there. It's it's powerful. Any powerful moment, the opposite. And just like with my mother, I saw birth was standing there with its arms open. And so when she passed, my sister went in to take care of details, and I'm sitting there with my mother's body, singing to her, talking to her spirit, and to help her let go, because the body is, there's the soul or the spirit, then there's the body spirit, which kind of hangs around and is connected to earth. And I decided I was going to wash my mother's body. I had not seen it done, but I wanted to do it as a respect, to take care of her. Because I didn't like the idea of letting her go into the hands of strangers. And it's a strange thing when, as human beings, we give our most sacred ceremonial moments of death and birth are handed over to strangers. People we don't know, and the family is excluded. And so I was going to wash my mother, and next thing I know, my sister has the undertakers or the funeral home people there with a stretcher, and they're coming in to get my mother's body. And I said, no. And I got a little adamant. Like, no, but then she was adamant. And I thought, well, I don't want, because those moments, like with someone's passing or with birth, or they're so tender and sacred and malleable. That's why it's important over a birth to say kind words, even while you're carrying a child, or you're growing that spirit, so I said, well, I don't want to I let it go, because I didn't want that, didn't want fighting around my mother. And so then suddenly I'm sitting there, and of course I rewrite constantly. And often, and I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And, but the template, this poem just came almost as it is. I did a lot of rewriting and taking out. It was even longer. But it wanted to be written. And I realized in writing it, it's like in writing a poem, it's a ceremony, it's a ritual. The poem itself is a ritual. There's a title, which is an opening, a doorway, and then the first lines are, there's the ritual of becoming, and you could break it down, and then how do you have to have an opening, a way to leave, and then a way to return, because a poem might want you to return, and So I learned that I could go back, that it was possible to go back in a poem and, speak to history, of course, and wash my mother's body. I never got to wash my mother's body when she died. I returned to take care of her in memory. That's how I make peace when things are left undone. I go back and open the door. I step in to make my ritual, to do what should have been done, what needs to be fixed so that my spirit can move on, so that the children and grandchildren are not caught in a knot of regret they do not understand. I find the white enamel pan she used for bread and biscuits. It's the same pan she used to bathe us in when we were babies. I turn the faucet on and hold my hand under the water until it is warm, the temperature one uses to wash an infant. I find a clean washcloth in a stack of washcloths. She had nothing in her childhood. She made sure she had plenty of everything when she grew up and made her own life. Her closets were full of pretty dresses, so many she had not the time to wear them all. They were bought by the young girl who wore the same flour sack dress to school every day, the one she had to wash out every night and hang up to dry near the wood stove. I pick up the bar of soap from her sink, the same soap she used yesterday morning to wash her face. When she looked in the mirror, did she know that it would be her last sunrise? I move over pill bottles, a clock radio on the table by the bed, a pen, and set down the pen. I straighten the blankets over her to keep her warm for dignity. I start with her face. Her face is unlined even 2 months before her 80th birthday. She was known for her beauty, and when younger, passed for the Cherokee that she was through her mother and her mother's mother, all the way back through time's beginning. My mother had the iron pot given to her by her Cherokee mother, whose mother gave it to her, given to her by the U.S. government on the Trail of Tears. She grew flowers in it. As I wash my mother's face, I tell her how beautiful she is, how brave, how her beauty and bravery live on in her grandchildren. Her face is relaxed, peaceful. Her earth memory body has not left yet. But when I see her the next day, embalmed and in the casket in the funeral home, it will be gone. Where does it go? It is heavier than the spirit who lifted up and flew. I think of it making the rounds to every place it has loved to say goodbye. Goodbye to the house where I brought my babies home, she sings. Goodbye to June's bar where I was the shuffleboard queen. I cannot say goodbye yet. I will never say goodbye. I lift up each arm to wash. Her hands still wear her favorite rings. She loved her body and decorated it with shiny jewelry, with creams and makeup. I am tender over that burn scar on her arm, for when she cooked at the place with the cruel boss, who insisted she reach her hand into the friolator to clean it. She had protested it was still hot and suffered a deep burn. The scar always reminded me of her coming in from working long hours in restaurants, her uniform drenched with sweat, determination, and exhaustion. Once she came home and I was burning up with a fever. She pulled out the same pan I am dipping the washcloth in now, only she's added rubbing alcohol to bring the fever down. She washes tenderly, tells me about how her friend Chunky left her husband again, how she knows her old boss, a Jewish woman who treated her kindly, has cancer. She doesn't know how she knows, she just knows. She doesn't tell me that. I find it in a journal she has left me, a day book in which she has written notes for me to find when she is gone. I wash her neck and lift the blankets to move down her heart. I thank her body for carrying us through the tough story, through the violence of my father and her second husband. Her mother's mother died when she was born, and her adoptive mother, another Cherokee woman, had no love in her heart for a tiny girl whose light hair betrayed her Indianness. My grandmother did not know how to mother my mother. The story is all there in her body. As I wash her to prepare her to be let down into earth and to return all stories to the earth. My body memories rise up as I wash. I recall carrying my 2 children, rocking them and feeding them from my body. How I knew myself as beloved earth in that body. I uncover my mother's legs. I remember the varicose veins that swelled like rivers when my mother would get off a long shift of standing and cooking. They carried more than a woman should carry. A woman should be honored like a queen. Traditionally, we treated our women with that kind of respect, my Creek husband tells me. Ha, I laugh and ask him, then why aren't you cooking my dinner? I wash her feet and caress them. You will have some rest now, I tell my mother, even as I know my mother was never one for resting. I cover her. I make the final ring of the washcloth and drape it over the pan. I brush my mother's hair and kiss her forehead. I ask the keepers of the journey to make sure her travel is safe and sure. I ask the angels whom she loved and with whom she spoke frequently to take her home. But wait, not before I find her favorite perfume. Then I sing her favorite song softly. I don't know the name of the song, just a few phrases. One of those old homemade heartbreak songs where there's a moment of happiness wound through. And then I let her go. I think I'll close with this one. It's called Equinox. And I wrote this while standing out, at least the notes of this poem, because many drafts later. I wrote it while I was standing outside a haunted B&B in the middle of Michigan waiting for my ride. I said this at a few readings back, and the woman who picked me up came up and said, that was me who picked you up at that. And I want to say thank you. I mean, there's so much that goes into putting an event on like this. You know, people picking you up, people leaving their homes and coming here to work and to write poetry and all the preparations. And there's so many people involved. There's the visionary, and he was here last night. What is his name? Miles, yes. So I want to thank Miles and there's so many people. Susan Williamson, and Jennifer lit, as in lit up with poetry. And is it Yadira? I guess that's right. Yadira, who's been a great help, and Laura, who is a bright, shining light, and who introduced me and interviewed, really great interview, and then all the sound people too, Brooke, Josh, and then the Jason, who is helping with the stage, and the people who cooked, and all the poets too, all the poets and the lovers of poetry. We wouldn't be here without everybody. People will come up and say something about a performance, but the performance isn't just me here. The performance is really the spirit of this place and this building, the history of this building. And it's you, it's everybody, it's in here. It's even this room has a spirit to it, and the fixtures. It's good to bless when you go into bless the electricity running through here and the light, and there's so much. So say Mado, thank you, and I'm really honored that I got to be here and to be here with you. And I'll carry good memories from this place. So anyway, back to the story. I was standing there, and I was thinking about that morning. I'd gotten up, and it was so beautiful, and I went out. It's good to go out and catch the sun, that light. It's like catching. It's energizing. You can prove it scientifically, but the old people who are gone now, they always did that. They were always up at dawn, and they would go out and pray in the direction of the sun and gather light. And gather the light to use as a blessing to family members and to the, to the day, the spirit of the day. And I was thinking about that. Even the birds do it. They get out there, and the robins always have you heard? There's always one robin who's out there who tells the whole story. We have somebody like that. They're called the speaker, who walks around the ceremonial grounds saying what's going to go on and so on. Well, there's a robin. I've heard that. There's a robin who does that in every group of robins. And then I was thinking about, I was watching the sun going down, and I didn't know where I was. But I realized there was a lot I needed to forgive, and that how sundown, it's a good time to let things go. Let go grief. Can you imagine if you were to do that every evening? And I try to remember, I don't always, but if we were to let go grief, if we were to let go, small things we didn't get done, small infractions, ways we hurt each other intentionally and non-intentionally, and things that we hold. If we were to, at sunset, it was to let it go, we would be a lot healthier. And so I was thinking about that when I wrote this poem. Okay, the last song. I must keep from breaking into the story by force. If I do, I will find a war club in my hand, and the smoke of grief staggering toward the sun. Your nation dead beside you. Walking away, though it has been an eternity, and from each drop of blood, each one springs up sons and daughters and trees, a mountain of sorrows, of songs. Tell you this from the dusk of a small city in the north, not far from the birthplace of cars and industry. Geese are returning to mate, and crocuses have broken through the frozen earth.